I'd like you to just start with what happened in the background and what led up to you creating your current business.
So what happened? What happened in the background? So, okay. So my parents divorced when I was 8, which was very traumatic for me, to the point where I blocked out my whole childhood. I can't remember my childhood prior to 8 years old. Every once in a while, when a family member says something, it might spark something, but aside from that, I don't remember. It made me very angry. And then add in 2 terrible step families. My stepdad and his family stole and lied to each other. They tried to steal from us. Like, I mean, the grandkids were stealing from the parents. Both the grandkids and the parents were stealing from the grandmother. Like, it was just a whole lineage of negativity. And then my dad married a terrible step family. She was had been abused in her prior relationship, so she was very controlling with my dad, to the point where he had to lie to see his daughters for breakfast and tell her that he went to work. And that, to me, was not, your kids come before anybody else. Like, so I had a lot of resentment and stuff there. And then those led into me falling into 2 negative divorces of my own, or marriages. The divorces were positive, but the marriages were negative, right? Because they were emotionally abusive, psychologically abusive. I've basically been through everything but physical abuse. And so after my second divorce and loss of a child in 2015, I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I collecting these people? Right? They were alcoholics. My second ex-husband ended up, I consider him an addict, because he went from beer to cocaine to hard liquor. Right? When he quit the beer, he went to cocaine. When he quit the cocaine, he went to hard liquor. To me, rule of 3, if you can't stop and you just keep switching the vice, then that's an addict, right? That's a personal definition for me. I'm not judging anybody. That's just, and so I really had to take a hard look at a lot of things, right? I also got the Energy Medicine book by Dr. Donna Eden, which I preach about all the time. It goes through 9 of the energy systems. And so as I was clearing that stuff out, boy, did I have some heavy, heavy stuff that I really had to look through. And so it took me 2 years to get through that book, but a lot of those habits stemmed from my family, right? So my family had a lot of traits of being emotionally immature, and also alcohol, drug abuse, jail, right? All these things. They have a lot of positive traits. I don't want anybody thinking that I'm talking negative about my family. I love them dearly, but their habits led to my habits. Right? Because when you grow up, like, you don't know the world except for the world that you're being raised by. And so this is what you think is normal. And then when you realize things aren't working for you, or you have a lot of conflict in your life, or you can't hold relationships, or you're picking the wrong people, then you have to, at some point, it's healthy to be able to look outside that and be like, okay, what else is out there in the world that will help me to change what I'm doing and change the habits that I have? Because I think, in my opinion, everything is a habit, and habits can be broken and habits can be recreated. It's just a matter of what habits that you want. So that was kind of how I got into this. And so by the time I was going through the energy medicine book, I was a massage therapist. And so I was already in the healing arts. And so this just kind of added more to what I offered my clients. And so after a few years of that, now I'm a spiritual relationship mentor and have this mini course that you mentioned in my bio.
I'm really excited about your free mini course. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, it's free. So I will be linking in the show notes her website where you can access that that free mini course, because it's touching upon something I have never ever thought about before, or even thought existed, about how we have relationships with different concepts. Uh, it's just something that has never been brought to my attention. And, sometimes we're very aware of our problems, and then other times we're unaware of our problems. So I appreciate when someone like yourself comes in and says, hey, let's shed light on this aspect of your spirituality and relationship, because you may not understand how it's playing a part in your broader life. And so I'm really excited about that. I want to ask you, we're going to go in that direction right now, because our episode is about 30 minutes. So I want to deep dive fast so that we can get the most value out to those of you who are listening. So give me some understanding about our relationship to these different concepts that I mentioned in the introduction.
Okay. So how I'm going to describe it first is, right, so you have a car, and most of us just see the car, and we get in it and we use it to go from A to B and B to A, right? But there's different components to the car. You have the engine, you have the muffler, you have, right? You have the tires and the brakes, right? So while there's a lot of talk out there and a lot of people helping us get into relationship with self, which is fabulous, right? We need to be in relationship with self. But just like a car, we have different components. Yes, we have our mentality. Yes, we have our emotions, but we can also be in relationship with our heart. We can be in relationship with our hearing. We can be in relationship with our independence. Like, how do you define independence? How do you define that in work versus in relationships, intimate relationships versus familial relationships? All of these different components and different layers to who we are. And to me, I have found that it is important to have a relationship with each different layer and each different component, right? There's a lot of mindset coaches out there, right? Millionaire mindset, financial mindset, all these things, but there's at least 5 sub-layers to that, right? You have spending, receiving, debt, investment, and savings. Those are 5 different relationships within finances.
Okay.
Right. So knowing what those all look like, and as we mentioned earlier, bringing in the senses. When you think of debt, what visceral reaction are you having? Do you get butterflies in the stomach? Do you break into a cold sweat? Are you excited about debt? Like, and not just that, but what are the emotions, right? So there's 8 senses that are out there, right? Most know sight, hearing, smell, and taste. But there's also knowing, the sense of just knowing. And then there's 3 senses around feelings: touch, emotions, and visceral reaction. And I'll explain to you why this is so important. It is the first way we ever develop a relationship as human beings. In the womb with our mothers, all we have is our senses. We don't have vocabulary. We don't have body language. I mean, we do a little bit if we decide to kick her, but she doesn't know what that means, right? Like, okay, they're kicking around, like, right? So all we have in the womb are our senses. So getting back to that innate way of identifying and defining relationships, I find is the most important way to do it, right? So you mentioned, my 7 key relationships are the finances, the emotions, the mindset, the mentality, but then there's vulnerability. What's your relationship with judgment? What's your relationship with independence? And most importantly, what is your relationship with your intuition? Because too often I hear people say things like, oh yeah, I heard this voice in my head tell me to take a different route to work, but I didn't know what it was, so I didn't listen to it. So I took my normal route to work, and lo and behold, I was late because there was a traffic accident. So how do we get you to know, like, and trust your intuition so that you will listen to that inner guidance that's trying to guide you?
Mhm. Okay. So I feel like because we got to speak a little bit before this interview, you gave me some background, and you're saying it again, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is such a, like, I feel like my brain is growing as you're talking.
Awesome.
And I'm trying to, so when you're in that mode, you're processing and you're like, okay, what's the questions I ask around that? I don't even know where to start. But I would like to start with the senses, because if that's
Mhm.
how we start interacting with those different components
Mhm.
that you call, then it's probably a good idea for us to understand those senses that we're not familiar with, those other three that you mentioned. So I feel like sight, hearing, smell, and taste, got it. We those are very 3D.
Yeah.
And so the other ones, about knowing, feeling your emotions, your mentality, and intuition. No,
Mhm.
nope, not.
Nope.
See, feeling,
Touch.
your touch. Look, this is a good quiz for me. Feeling in your touch, uh, visceral reaction, and
Emotion.
emotion and mentality.
And knowing.
Yes, and your
Yes.
knowing.
Right. So, so let's start with the emotions. Right. Knowing how something makes us feel, emotionally speaking, is important so that we can communicate it to ourselves and then communicate it to other people. Right. But most people do not know how to define their emotions.
Yes, I would like you to maybe expand how someone might do that if they're not familiar with having to, if they're not emotionally intelligent.
Right. So I have an emotion wheel that I use with my clients, and it's got like 40 or 50 emotions on them, which most people are like, holy crap, I didn't even know there were that many emotions out there. Right. And so I get them to start thinking, and I get through verbal coaching, I get them to start working out the words, but I also suggest that they get on ChatGPT or some AI platform and ask it for 5 different definitions of that emotion to help get the inspiration and the creativity going, but then still narrow it down and keep defining it for themselves until it clicks in here in their heart. Right? Because once it clicks, you're just like, oh my gosh, like that's it. That's how I define anger. Right? So there's a recent client that I've been working with. She kept saying at the beginning of the program, she kept saying, oh, I'm always overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. And then so when I gave her the emotion wheel, the 3 that she picked were overwhelmed, irritated, and happy. And she's like, I realized I'm more irritated than overwhelmed. Like once she was able to define them for herself, and then she could then communicate it to her husband. And he's like, oh, so you're irritated by this. Okay, done. I'll stop. Like I'll we'll switch that up. Right. So once she can define it, then she can communicate it. And that's the whole piece. Right? How can we tell somebody else how we feel or why we're mad or why we're angry that they did what they did if we can't even define it inside of us?
Mm-hmm.
Which means there's a whole piece, like for me, the number one key to any relationship is communication. That's a huge piece of communication that's missing.
I think a lot of people struggle with that, where they have all the feelings, but they don't know how to communicate the feelings in a way that's productive, right? If, like, for example, if you're angry, it's going to come out in not so nice way and productive way. It's probably going to be uh, deprecating, or, just it never leads to anything good. But if you're angry and you're able to communicate that, then that can actually be a vehicle in which you can come to a different kind of understanding with the person you're angry with.
Right. But is it really anger? Or are you mad? Or do you feel betrayed? Or do you feel misunderstood? Right? There's a lot more to it that, right? Most people just jump to being angry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I invite you to really take a step back, right? Clam your mouth. Don't use any fists. And just take a step back and ask yourself, is this the right word that really represents how I feel?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for making that distinction, because even like I could see in my personal life, my son, if he gets angry, it's because he was actually hurt, not because he's angry, but the hurt turns into anger.
Yes.
And then we're already starting at an escalated level. So rather
Right.
than
So
discussing no
the
problem.
hurt leads to anger, leads to distrust.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Okay.
if we can not get it to the point of distrust, because then you have to earn the trust back. And there's a lot of repair and maintenance going on there, right? And it's a lot harder to overcome distrust than it is to maintain trust.
Yeah. Well, you're dropping bombs left and right. But this is why you all need to go to the free mini course. We're going to just be getting to the surface at this level. But this will give you a good introduction of what may be available to you when you start working with Wendy. So let's move to the feeling of mentality.
Yes, one of my favorite subjects, because people talk about mindset, which mindset is great. I look at it in the view of conscious brain versus subconscious, right brain versus left brain, feminine habits or components versus masculine component. And how do we find a balance between those? Because most people that I know or that I hear about tend to use their conscious brain way too much. And then they feel overwhelmed, they get headaches, they get migraines, they get exhausted, and they don't know what to do about it, right? So, and this is one of the things that I talk about in my mini course is how to, and let me take a step back, right? When we overuse a particular muscle, right, that means we're not using the opposing muscle, right? So if we're always using our flexors, our forearm muscles right here to type, that means we're not using the top of the forearm muscles, right? So that means these forearm muscles or flexors get overworked, they get tired, we end up with carpal tunnel. And the top forearm muscles get weak, they get complacent, and they atrophy. It's the same thing with our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. When we overuse our conscious mind for the things that it's not meant to be used for, it gets overwhelmed, it gets burnt out, it gets exhausted. And then our subconscious mind in the back is getting lazy and complacent and atrophying because it's not being used.
Wow. Okay. Follow-up question on that.
Mm-hmm.
How do we exercise our subconscious mind when it's something that we're not conscious about?
Well, part of it is bringing the awareness and bringing the consciousness to what part of your brain are you actually using, right? So our conscious brain is designed for logic, reasoning, decision-making, all of those things. Our subconscious, its main job is to record everything. So let it record, let it do the remembering and all of those things, and then just ask it to bring forward the information that you need at that moment in order to make that decision, in order to go through that logical process of whatever it is that you're going through, and leave the rest of the information in the subconscious.
Okay, can you ground that in an example?
Right? So let's give an example. Let's say you're getting ready to write an article. Magazine article, some sort of educational something, right? You need a topic. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to give it in this example, reading. Because everybody can relate to this. When you read, do you consciously read every single word on the page and overwhelm your conscious brain trying to remember, right? It's a short-term memory. Your conscious mind has very short-term memory. So are you trying to force it to remember every word on the page, which is not its job? Or can you speed read, intentionally asking your subconscious to remember to record what you're reading, and then later ask it to bring up only that which is important to you?
So good. I love that example. What came up in my mind was that my son he became a speed reader just because he started reading at 3. But by the time he was 6, he was surpassing me. And, at that age, we would be doing dishes and he would start reciting this poem, a long poem. And I'm like, or quoting people that he read. And I'm like, what? How are you recalling all of this? Do kids have an easier time doing that because they're not so caught up on like comprehension of every single word?
They're also not caught up in adulthood, right? And they don't have as many neural habits set as we do, right? They have a very young life. They've only had so many experiences. Therefore, their minds are still very open and still very clean of all these mental mindsets and habits and everything that we've developed at 46, 49, 35, however old we are, right? The older you get, the more information is in your processor, right? Think about it like a computer. The older the computer, the more stuff there's likely to be on it, right? So sometimes we have to clear out all of that stuff in order to get back to those basics that the kids have.
Gotcha. Very, very cool. Okay, visceral.
Okay, right? So visceral meaning goosebumps, your hair standing up, you get the shivers down your spine, you break into a cold sweat, right? Those are all visceral reactions to something, to anything, right? For example, somebody, when they think about debt, it could make their stomach nauseous. That's a visceral reaction. When you think about your loved one, maybe you get butterflies, or maybe you get chilled just thinking about your spouse or, somebody special, right? Those are all visceral reactions. So it's really important to bring your awareness to those reactions so that you can decide whether or not that's a positive or negative thing, because if it's a negative, keep it out of your world. If it's a positive, you want to bring more of that in.
But there are some things that we can't take out of our world, like debt, let's say.
Right. So then that's where you need to decide what your relationship is with that and set boundaries, right? Are you okay with being 20% in debt? Are you okay with being 50% in debt? Or do you want zero debt and just want to live off digital currency? Right? What is that? How do you set the boundaries around it? Right? And how do you spend your time? How do you keep, this is my favorite quote. It's not about being triggered. It's about how much time you spend being triggered. So if debt is triggering you, what tools do you have to get yourself out of being triggered so that you can move into the logic and figure out the boundary?
Is that something you help your clients do?
100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, last one, knowing. The knowing sense.
Knowing. Yes. We all have this innate sense of just knowing. Right? Aside from the conscious or unconscious mind, right? Because there's a difference between the mind and the brain. And there's a difference between those and our sense of knowing or our sense of intuition, which is higher and above our mind and our brain. So if we can step outside of our brain and just get into our sense of intuition, which is our GPS navigation device that's built inside of us, right? But we have to know what our brain sounds like. We have to know what our mind sounds like in order to know what our knowing sounds like, our intuition.
To make those distinctions.
To be able to make the distinctions. What do they sound? Do they sound feminine, masculine? Do they sound more distant? Do they sound more closer away? Does it sound like for me, when I'm in my brain, it sounds like something I would speak. When I'm in my mind, it feels like something, it feels a little more distant. And when I'm in my sense of knowing, it feels like it's coming from above.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of, you just have to kind of tune in, but that's the kind of the sense of knowing and be like, okay, what are my, when I hear this thought, is it a thought? Right? This is about being in relationship with self. Asking yourself, is this a thought? Is this a mind thing? Or is this a sense of knowing?
Okay.
Right? You have to ask yourself that in order for yourself to be able to answer, because the only person that can know that could possibly know is you.
Right. And I'm assuming you help with the clients to make those distinctions also, because oftentimes I know if you walk through a meditation, say someone's leading you in a meditation to meet God, or meet an angel. And I know I struggle with those kinds of meditations because I'm kind of like one eye open, like, wait, is that me or is this God or is this, whose voice is this? Right.
Right. And so really the way that I guide my clients with that, because there's no, actually I can't say that, but I try to teach my clients how to identify that themselves, because I want you to have your, what I call operational intelligence. I want you to be able to know you, right? I don't want to tell you about you, because then it's not being authentic. You're not authentically finding yourself. Right? So I guide my clients through that. Right? So a lot of the times it's all about being patient. We're so used to instant gratification. We're so used to getting an immediate response that we don't wait for the response. And when you're trying to, that's a neural pathway or a habit that you're trying to change, right? You're used to the instant gratification, you're used to that. So when you're in the practice of trying to listen to something or for something that you're not used to listening to, you're breaking a neural pathway, you're breaking a habit. and it takes time to break habits. Therefore, you need to be patient and you need to wait for the response to come. So it may take 30 seconds, it may take 5 minutes, it may take a half an hour. It may be something that you need to practice over and over again before you ever get a response, because it creates the habit in order to get the response sometimes. So it all depends on how cognizant you're being with it, with the practice, how open your mind is, right? Because if you're still in the mode of, oh, I've got to make dinner and my kid needs to do homework and I still have these tasks to do for work, and you're still in your logical, in your brain, then you can't hear anything above that. You can't hear the mind and you can't hear the intuition and the sense of knowing if you're still in your brain, because your brain is the closest thing to you, so it's going to be the loudest. You have to be able to get out of the brain, past the conscious mind, and get up to the knowing, right? So if you have to go through all three of those steps, it takes time.
Mm-hmm. So give yourself patience and grace
Yes.
to make these distinctions for yourself and increase that self-awareness so that you can go into creating these relationships that you speak about in your free mini course, the judgment, the intuition, the vulnerability, etc.
Yep.
So you believe these 7 essential relationships to friendpreneurs are those 7?
Yes.
Ones, okay.
100%. Absolutely. Because they're all the different components that make up entrepreneurship, and they all affect our outer world. They affect our decision making in business. It all affects who we hire or who we do business with. It affects how we're in relationship with our family or our friends that are non-entrepreneurs, right? It's really important to understand your entrepreneurship relationships in order to be able to communicate that to the people in your world that are non-entrepreneurs that don't understand.
So to bring this all together, I would like, let's choose which one is most related to fempreneurship.
Independence.
Okay, independence. I was thinking of that one too.
Yeah.
So let's take independence and see how this works out with the 8 senses that you helped us describe.
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Right? So when you think, so I'm going to ask you this, right?
Okay.
We're going to practice on you then.
Yeah,
right?
let's play.
So when you think, close your eyes and think of the word independence. What emotions do you feel?
Joy, excitement, freedom.
Okay. What visceral reactions are you feeling? Is your heart beating faster?
Yes, and a smile coming to my face.
Yeah, see? Okay, those are all visceral reactions, right? Sometimes we'll get like the little chills on our scalp, right? So now you know what it feels, what the visceral and the emotions feel like, right? Is there, when you have in your mind's eye, right? So this is sight. In your mind's eye, what does independence look like?
Doing what I want, when I want, where I want. Do you need more than that?
No, that's fine. Yes, right. So that's mind's eye when it comes to sight in this application. Right. And then let's go into sound or hearing. Is there a song? Is there a sound? Is like what in relationship to anything regarding hearing or sound that comes to you when you think of the word independence?
Yeah, what dropped in was Katy Perry's Hear Me Roar song. I don't know if that's the name of it, but that's
Yep.
not mine.
Okay. Is there a smell or a food or a taste that is associated with independence? Like a perfume or a flower or a food. Don't think about it, just let it come to you.
So yes, when you said perfume, um, a Coach uh perfume dream came to me.
Okay, so there's your smell. Is there a food related item?
Hmm. Healthy food. Because if I'm
Okay,
independent, I'm gonna have a personal I'm gonna have the independence to hire a personal chef to make
yes,
healthy food.
yes, I love it. Okay, in regards to touch, is there something that you touch that makes you feel independent?
I don't know if this is touch, but like driving in my car.
Yes, because you're touching the steering wheel,
Yeah.
right? Being able to drive yourself around,
Mhm.
right? So that's 7 of the 8 senses. So the last one is knowing.
Mm.
How do you know when you are feeling or when you're in the space of being independent?
Mm. Just I get to live life on my terms.
There you go. You just went through the 8 senses and you just described what independence means to you.
Mm.
So now that we've brought this to your awareness, anytime you feel one of those feelings is the reward system for knowing that you're in independence.
Mm. Okay, so how is that related to our businesses?
Right? So in relationship to business, we need to know, right? There's the opposing, right? We're in business because we want to be independent.
Right.
We don't want to follow somebody else's rules, somebody else's guidelines. But then there's those times where we feel like we're the lone wolf or we're on this island by ourselves and nobody understands us. Right? So how do we find one of those 8 when we're in that space of feeling like we're the lone wolf? How do we find an element out of one of those 8 senses that
Mm.
brings us back into feeling independent?
Like go for a drive.
Go for a drive. Go smell your favorite perfume. Go
Mm.
listen to Katy Perry. Right? Knowing what it feels like when you slip out of that, now you know the tools that you need to have in order to bring you back in to feeling independent.
So good. Thank you.
And you have 8 tools to be able to do that. Now you have 8 tools in your bag to get yourself back into feeling independent when you're not feeling like you are.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, after that little tiny experience, I want to go to your website and get that course. So if you're listening to this and want to do it for yourself, I'm going to encourage you to go to Wendy's website. Can you just tell us your website really quick of where they can get that course?
So it's not on my, I
Well,
just
it will
launched
be.
it
It will
yesterday.
be. It
It
will.
will be on my website 100%, by the end of this weekend. So my website is tbrspiritualhealth.com. That's T as in 2, B as in B, and R as in revealed. So to be revealed, TBR, spiritualhealth.com.
Awesome. So go there, grab that mini course, and start increasing your self-awareness. And because as a fempreneur myself, I know I could use all the help I can get. And I truly believe that one of the keys to success is a deep knowing and self-awareness of yourself, because it really does dictate everything, our identity, our all our senses. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I did not understand the power that is available to us for free, right in our bodies and in our sense.
Yes.
Like, this is amazing. I don't know if it's blowing your mind as you're listening to this, but it's blowing my mind because I feel like I have added some amazing tools to my toolkit for success. So, I get that after you do the mini course, you might want to go deeper with Wendy and have someone guide you along in your journey so that you can go get your dreams, right? Like we're all here to pursue our dreams. And I appreciate your vulnerability, Wendy, for
Absolutely.
coming on, telling us your story from the beginning, because it fueled you to do this. And
Yes, and I'm grateful for everything. You know, when I wrote my book last year, my family was getting some pushback on me writing it because they're like, "Oh, they're putting your stuff out there, right?" And all the
Mhm.
things. And my mom asked me, she's like, "Well, why are you writing it?" And I was like, "If you want to know the why, then you need to read it."
Mhm.
Right? I'm grateful for everything that I went through because it made me who I am today. And so it's all about how you see your experiences. You can either be grateful or you can live in victim mentality. It's your choice, right? I choose to be grateful and to try and figure out a way to take that experience to help somebody else or to better myself or to use that information, use that experience in some sort of positive aspect.
Mhm.
Right? So when people hear that I've lost a child or that I lost a pregnancy, I usually get, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I am not sorry. I am not, because it gave me a much deeper empathy for other people who have lost a child much later than 6 weeks gestation.
Mhm.
Right? The lady that was rolling me into the ER was telling me how she lost hers at 6 months. Right? That is much harder to do. Everybody knows about it. You've got you're working on picking names, you're working on the nursery, like all of these things. Plus, they actually wanted it, right? Or people that have lost it after the child have lost their born child. I have so much deeper empathy for all of those people. And therefore, although my experience was difficult and emotional, I'm super grateful for it.
Yeah. Thank you for that perspective. It's nice to find like-minded people like that because not everyone shares that perspective on the hard times, on
Mhm.
the trauma times. Um, so I love the scripture that says what was meant for evil can be used for good, but it's our choice.
Mhm.
That's
100%.
our choice. And people like you with your coaching, with your ability to help us access what is already within us in order for us to define and uh, make these relationships with these important aspects or components to who we are so that we can build our success is I'm grateful for that. I could not do
You're
this
most
work.
welcome.
I could not have created
Yeah.
this. So I
Yeah.
love finding people like you.
Yay. Yes, I have found when you get into these deeper relationships with yourself, you find, and this is not a cliche or anything, but you literally find that you have endless possibilities.
Mm,
You
yeah.
really just open yourself up to so many things, and you realize there is no umbrella, there is no roof, there is no definition of what this should look like, what that should look like, what this should look like, because it can look like anything you want to create it.
Yes. That's so great. Thank you so much, Wendy, for
You're
coming
so
on the
welcome.
Small
Thank
Victories
you.
podcast.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. And to the listener, thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode has brought you value, has opened your mind to what else could be possible. It's easy to look at past examples or people who are doing what you want to do and say, I'll just do something similar. But what I believe Wendy's work does is it opens us up to what could be. Sky's the limit. Our creativity is the only thing that can limit us to what else may be available to us. So I want to encourage you and to let you know this is a knowing I have is that victory is already at hand. You just need to step into it and say yes to it. And using tools like this will allow you to do that with more ease and flow and help you see that not only is victory at hand, but that your dreams are possible and that you are here for a reason, that the things that have happened to you are meant for good. You can use them for good. And everything that you have been through, everything that you're learning on this podcast will then lead you to the life you truly desire, which is beyond what you can imagine. Thank you for tuning in. And until we meet again.